So in this lesson, I'm going to talk about doing some chord substitutions on Merle Travis's Saturday Night Shuffle. And if you want to check out the notation and tab for the example I just played, you can go to the link below or to the link on screen, sign up for my mailing list, and download the tab. So the basic version of Saturday Night Shuffle is really just, it's an 8-bar form. So it's got this C to F, and then a quick D7 to G7, and then a repeat, F, and then usually some kind of lick for the last 2 bars. And it's got a really similar chord progression to a John Hurt tune that is usually listed as Buck Dance, even though it's not the same thing as Buck Dancer's Choice. So they're kind of, those two songs are kind of cousins. But as Merle Travis goes through his Saturday Night Shuffle, at a certain point he starts to play some chord substitutions. And so what I did in the opening version was just to sort of jump right into that for the second half of the 8 bars. And what I did was to go from C to C7, except I did it as a C9 with a 13 on top and the third of the chord in the bass, and then went to F, and then went to an F minor 6 with the 9th on top, and then did C to A7 to D7 to G. And the reason I started thinking about things like this is because some of the variations Merle Travis does involve this descending bass line, where he goes, he gets to the second half of the tune and the bass line goes, and he's doing some kind of version usually of C to C7 with the 7th in the bass, and then an F chord with the 3rd in the bass, and then some kind of A flat chord, which you could finger as like a really awkward G chord up a half step, or as some kind of chord version like this of an A flat 7. And then C, and then he does some other usually pretty intricate chords, but you could just cycle through. So this idea of going C to C7 to F, you can actually view this A flat chord, not that you necessarily want to, but if I always remember coming across this kind of chord in ragtime things like and that's another version of this A flat chord, and thinking, well, it's cool, but why is it there? And when I was kind of looking at this, I was thinking, oh, well, you know, this A flat chord is really kind of an inversion of this F minor 7, which is kind of like this F minor 6, and the F minor 6 resolves to C really nicely, I think because this note here, the flat 3rd of F minor, wants to go down to G, which is the 5th of C, and this note here, the 6th of the F, wants to come up to the 3rd, so those guys want to resolve. So that's a really common thing to have happen. And so this is just a variation or a substitution for that. So you can have this, and then play your lick or go through a turnaround. And the turnaround that you could reach for is to go C, A7, D7, G7. And that's just a cycle of dominant chords, and each one is a 5th up from the next chord, and it actually is easier to understand if you do it backwards. So if you think, okay, G is the 5 in the key that we're in, C, and G resolves to C because the 5 resolves to the 1. So next we're going, well, what's the 5 of G? That's D7. Okay, so D7, if I just sort of borrow that D7 from the key of G, and I say, because I'm in this key of C, and there is not supposed to be a D7 in the key of C, but we're going to say, I'm going to take a D7, and we'll use that to get to the G, and then the G will take us to C. So we're cool. And then we go, but what's the 5 of D? This could go on all day, but we're just going to go this far. We're going to go, well, A is the 5 of D. If you're in the key of D, the 5 chord is A. So A leads to D, and D leads to G, and G leads to C. So when you get to here, that takes you back around. And you can do all kinds of things with what's happening on top. That's just one. You could just say, well, I'm just going to follow this note up chromatically. And then you could make melodic kinds of fragments out of that. Whatever you can come up with, just so that you can think of it as just these static chords, or you can use it as the basis for some improvised idea. So back to the first thing that I talked about, which is this. It's a similar sort of thing, but just for the first half of that whole moment. So, so we're going along like this. And then the tune initially, or originally, goes C to F. But now we're just dressing up that change from C to F with C to C7. Remember, C7 takes you over to F. And then to C minor, which, as you recall now, takes you back to C. And then we could go through all of this, and we could play, instead of just an A7, we could play something tricky like that, which is an A7. There's the flat 7 and third, and then a flat 13 or a sharp 5. So, and again, that's just thinking about what's on top. And in this case, we're going from the third of C on top, this note here, to going up a half step, and then going down to C, to D, and then, so thinking, get a little melodic thing on top. And again, you could go in a dozen different directions melodically. But the idea is just to think a little bit about, well, what's on top and what am I trying to do? And if you frame it as just a simple set of chords that have some direction, like this one, then your licks that go over the thumb can have some direction too. So let me play the whole thing one more time, just with that variation that I talked about. So, so that's a couple ideas about how to mix up the chord changes on a tune like Saturday Night Shuffle. Again, you can download the tab, which actually spells out all those notes and things and where the thumb's going and all that. So you can go to the link below or the link at the end of the lesson and download that tab. And if you've got questions about this arrangement or anything on a similar subject, drop me a line in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time.